So I'm going to record myself writing a 45-minute DBQ. Um, I am on my desk. I have a DBQ planning worksheet from Heimler History. I have a checklist of the basic things that I need. I have the unit guides at a glance just in case I need them. And that's all I have out. You guys might have out some more stuff. I'm going to pretend that I'm doing the copy paste submission onto AP Classroom. And so I have this would be my AP Classroom page where the prompt would show up right here, and then this would be what I would be typing on. You can do it in Microsoft Office, like Office 365 Word. That might even help because that auto saves. I just always have my desktop Word pulled up. I'm doing a DBQ that I assigned you guys, but one that I borrowed from someone else, so I've never actually worked through it or even really seen the documents at all. I'm going to talk through it as I work through it, and you guys can kind of see my thinking process. And if I ever seem like I'm hesitating or something, it's because that's natural even for your teachers. I will show you, I'll send a picture of the planning sheet that I work through, but you're going to see me working on the screen itself, so you're not going to see that planning sheet, but I'll talk through it. So I am going to imagine that, or I'm going to pretend that I have my countdown, and I'm going to ask Siri to time me for 45 minutes, and then I'm going to write so that I could feel your pain for tomorrow. Okay. Hey Siri, set a timer for 45 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Lost the connection. Let me try that again. Okay. 45 minutes and counting.
Okay. All right. My prompt is here. Oh my gosh, I'm reading through it. Here's my checklist I can use later. And here's the prompt. Evaluate the extent to which various ideologies contributed to the development of European and American imperialism from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Well, that's a mouthful. Okay, Heimler's history planning sheet. My thinking skill. Various ideologies. I'm guessing there's going to be different ones, so I'm guessing I'm going to be comparing. And I am comparing ideologies for imperialism. I totally spelled ideologies wrong. And the time period is 1800s to 1900s. Okay, so I'm going to start with the document. So it's kind of long. Document 1, Karl Peters, a German author. What the heck? Die Gründung von Deutsch Ostafrika, the Foundation of German East Africa. Okay, 1906. Manifesto of the Society for German Colonization, April 1884. In the partition of the earth, as it has proceeded from the beginning of the 15th century upon to our times, the German nation received nothing. Huh, they're talking about the when the Pope gave land to Portugal and Spain. All the remaining European culture-bearing people possess areas outside our continent where their language and customs can take firm root and flourish. The moment that the German immigrant leaves the borders of the Reich behind him, he's a stranger, sojourning on foreign soil. The German Reich, great in size and strength, through its bloodily achieved unity, stands in the leading position among the continental European powers. Her sons abroad must adapt themselves to nations which look upon us with either indifferences or even hostility. For centuries, the great stream of German immigration has been plunging down into foreign races where it is lost sight of. Germandom, outside Europe, has been undergoing a perpetual national decline. The Society for German Colonization aims to undertake on its own, in a resolute and sweeping manner, carefully chosen colonization projects, and thereby supplement the ranks of organizations with similar tendencies. In particular, tasks will be 1. To provide necessary sums of capital for colonization. So that's one motivation. And I would the ideology for that would be capitalism or mercantilism, I feel like, for me. Two, to seek out and lay claim to suitable districts for colonization. Three, to direct German immigrants to these regions. Okay, so I feel like the main ideology for him or for Germany is like competition uh, for foreign soil because so many other European nations have done that. So for him, I feel like he really is focusing on like getting power by imperialism, and he wants, to build his industry. So he's almost like being very competitive, I feel like. Okay, document 2. Does civilization pay? Modern progressive nations lying in the temperate zone seek to control garden spots in the tropics. Under the direction of the progressive nations, these places can yield tropical produce. In return, the nations bring to the people of those garden spots the foodstuffs and manufactures they need. Progressive nations develop the territory by building roads, canals, railways, and telegraphs. They can establish schools and newspapers for the colonies and give these people the benefit of other blessings of civilization, which they have not the means of creating themselves. Okay, so this one I know that it's like talking about how these places can yield stuff for Europe, but I'm almost going to put this under the ideology of white man's burden because what he's really saying is that the European countries can help the other nations by giving them crops, giving them goods, developing roads, canals, railway, and giving them blessings of civilization. Oh my gosh, so conceited. That's where I feel like it's really the white man's burden. Okay, document 3. Selected African colonies and their exports. Angola, ruled by Portugal, exports cotton, palm oil, coffee, and sugar. All of those help Portugal with industry. So, this again is going to be industry or economic based. So this is basically a chart showing, I don't even have to read everything. It's showing how a colony has the raw materials that then goes to a European imperial power that then creates industrial material from the raw materials. There's like no source analysis for documents 2 and 3, so I would have to do document 1, a German author, and it's a manifesto of the Society for German Colonization. So he is a German. See, I don't even like that. Let me see what the other ones are. Document 4, an excerpt from a speech that the Premier of France delivered before the French National Assembly. In the area of economics, I allow myself to place before you, with the support of some figures, the considerations which justify a policy of colonial expansion from the point of view of that need, felt more and more strongly by the industrial populations of Europe, and particularly those of our own rich and hard-working country, the need for export markets. Does France need to pursue colonial expansion? Yes. What is lacking for our great industry, drawn irrevocably on the path by exportation by the free trade? We lack export markets. Because next door to us, Germany is surrounded by barriers. Because beyond the ocean, the U.S. has become protectionist in the most extreme sense. Because not only have these great markets, I will say closed but shrunk, and thus become more difficult of access for our industrial products. He's basically saying, like, certain markets have been closed off, like the Americas, because America had implemented the Monroe Doctrine, telling them to stay away. But also, these great states are beginning to pour products not seen heretofore into our markets. France cannot be merely a free country. She must also be a mighty country, exercising all of her rightful influence over the destiny of Europe. But she ought to spread this influence throughout the world and carry everywhere possible her language, her customs, her flag, her weapons, and her genius. So there's like two ideologies here. So one ideology is talking about economy and needing export markets. But then the other ideology is the fact that like they are superior and should spread their culture among the world. Okay, document 5, White Man's Burden. Political cartoon. John Bull in the plain top hat is leading the way for Uncle Sam and the Stars and Stripes. Okay, so we've seen this cartoon, so that's helpful. So this is clearly the ideology of white man's burden, or I could say social Darwinism, in that these regions need the help of industrialized places. So Berlin Conference was 1886, right? See, this is how you can use Google, but you don't want to like really use it. 1884. Okay. So for context, I'm going to do, or for source analysis, I'm going to do document 1, but I'm going to do context. And this was written in the time of Berlin Conference. So it makes sense that Germany feels like they can go into these other regions and that they have a right to, because Berlin Conference split up Africa. Then document 4. When taken into consideration that this is the premier of France, he clearly is promoting France's power and expansion. And he's giving a speech to the assembly, so he wants to promote expansionist ideas in their government. Okay. So for outside evidence, gosh, there's so much that I can include that it's tough to pick certain things. I'm going to group my documents first and then I'll think of outside evidence. So ideologies. I think one of the main ideologies that I see here is industry building. Industry or capitalism. And for that, I see document 1, document 3, document 4 if I have time. And then for the next one, the main ideology is European superiority. And I have document 2, 4, and 5. Okay. For context, I want to talk about, because I'm really talking about European ideology, I kind of want to talk about where that ideology came from. So I'm going to even go back to exploration a little bit. Then I'm going to talk about how they started the Industrial Revolution. And then I'm going to talk about why they kind of had that superiority complex. Okay, so that's what I'm doing for planning. I don't want to really write my thesis on the planning sheet, but maybe you could. Outside evidence document. See, it doesn't even really give specific evidence there. So what I could do is talk about like Cecil Rhodes's plan to connect Africa from south to north via railway. And then I don't know if it would be enough to talk about the term social Darwinism because it's kind of already discussed here. I think for document 3, what I will do is I will discuss how these are all African exports. I'll discuss how India was also viewed this way. And I'll talk about how like cotton was no longer even allowed to be used in India for industry. They had to just completely export it to England. And that will be my outside evidence. I'm not even going to bother doing complexity because this is already taking too long. Okay. So I don't know which one I want to argue more. Let me start with my context. Prior to the 1800s, the world was beginning to evolve into one of developed and developing nations based on the Industrial Revolution. Europe, through its early years of exploration, had grown confident in its innovation and was successful in being the first region to truly industrialize. This movement moved Europe from into a position of power in the global world. Other regions in Afro-Eurasia and the Americas were either continuing to develop industry at a slower rate, or they were content with their classical methods of governance and economy. Regions such as Africa and India were focusing on continuing trade as it had once existed before European influence, while also dealing with European powers inserting themselves into trade and showing their industrial force. European success in industry led to its desire for new raw materials and markets in Afro-Eurasia. And although the ideology of capitalism and industrial success was a large factor in European imperialism from 1800 to 1900, the ideology of European superiority and desire to build an empire based on that superiority was a more prominent reason for imperialism amongst European powers. I'm not even going to do a resulting in. Okay, I'm actually going to start with paragraph 1, looking at industry. One major ideology that promoted European imperialism from 1800 to 1900 was that of capitalism and industry. Capitalism was a system created in which entrepreneurs would open businesses, typically supporting a new industrial innovation. Europe, as small as it was constantly searching for access to raw materials and new export markets, looking at regions in Africa and Asia, looking often at regions. In a German manifesto, this idea is present when Document 1 clearly supports this ideology as it discusses the need for Germany to gain imperial possessions, not just to compete on a European level, but to gain the necessary supplies for a strong capitalist country. When taken into consideration that this document occurs at the same around the the same time as the Berlin Conference, a conference in which European powers chose how to split up African land to imperial powers. It is understandable, although not appropriate, I shouldn't include that. It is understandable that Germany felt they had a right to take African land and raw materials as their own. Other European countries had already done so, and Germany thought they would have the same benefit that they saw others experience. Another example of the ideology of capitalism affecting imperialism is that of the desire for export markets. European countries had built large industrial nations, but needed markets to sell their manufactured goods to, and looked toward Africa and Asia to do so. They even felt that selling these manufactured goods made them I'm not going to include that yet. Okay, document 4. Along with export markets, I'm going to go up here. A major ideology at the time was that of capitalism or mercantilism, in which European nations would create an empire built by taking land in regions rich with raw materials, and then they would use those raw materials to send back to Europe for industrial use or manufacturing. Document 3, a chart displaying African colonies, African regions imperialized by European colonies. Their raw materials and what became manufactured items that they became under industrialization. chart proves that African nations were imperialist for industrial and capitalistic purposes. Another example of this industrial system was in India, which was colonized by the British. India had been a main exporter of textiles throughout history, and they were rich in cotton. When Europe imperialized India, they used their capitalist ideology to not to take the raw material of cotton from India, export it to England, and manufacture it there. They further made it illegal for India to manufacture textiles on their own, pushing the ideology of European capitalism on a region that had once been rich in textiles. Back to the evidence on India. When England ruled it as a colony, India would become a market for the manufactured textiles that were manufactured in England, even though the raw material came from India itself. Although capitalism was a major ideology in European imperialism, the ideology of European superiority had a more prominent role behind the time period. Document 2. The author states how European powers believed that they were not only benefiting themselves economically, but also benefiting the colonized regions through giving them an industrial way of life in a rapid way, such as building roads and canals and railways. This is clearly showing that Europeans believed their industrial way of life was superior, and others should be thankful to be on the receiving end of it. An example of this benefit was the idea that Cecil Rhodes had in Africa. Cecil Rhodes became rich in diamond mining and believed that he could help African industry by connecting South and North Africa via a railway line. This thinking connects to the idea of European superiority because although he believed it would help African economy, he himself views rail as being developed and superior, but takes no consideration into African roots, cultures, and history, and what they view as being developed. Another document that supports the ideology of European superiority is that of the political cartoon titled White Man's Burden. The political cartoon portrays Western and industrialized nations carrying the developing nations on their back as though they are carrying them toward civilization by helping them develop. Additionally, the French premier gave a speech that supported the ideology of Europeans and their superiority, helping the nations they ruled over. He stated that French culture, speech should be spread to these regions for their benefit. The Premier of France, aiming this speech toward the French Assembly, is clearly hoping to gain political actions that support imperialism and that support both ideologies of superiority and capitalism. With the support of the French Assembly, the Premier would be able to put more focus on imperialism. Okay. The ideology of capitalism was not new in Europe. time of European exploration, there was an ideology of mercantilism in which American colonies would send raw materials to Europe to benefit the economy of the European mother countries. I believe that is when this ideology benefiting Europe's economies began, and it continued into the industrial age. Although these Europeans believed they were superior and almost the saviors of the regions they imperialized, the regions that they ruled over most likely did not view it that way. Seen in the political cartoon in document 5, European imperialism and superiority was marked with cultural ignorance. Oftentimes, the regions that they conquered did not view the European way of life as superior and did not feel the want European influence in their regions. Four minutes left. I'm going to preview it. 1800s. What's another word for like a savior? Okay, my timer's going off. Um, I'm not the. I shouldn't have like spell checked, and I wish I could have read over it more. You can see I didn't include a conclusion or anything, but I think I included all the documents. I included pre-context. I have my thesis. I included outside evidence. My outside evidence on with Cecil Rhodes, I'm not sure was really great, but I tried it. And then I did the source analysis with context of the Berlin Conference, and then the Premier of France wanting to have the government involved in pushing imperialism. Um, I think I could have made that a little bit more clear too. So I'm not like thrilled with what I did here. I think I would maybe get enough points to hopefully get a 4 or a 5, but that's what happens when you're doing it in 45 minutes and when you don't know what the prompt is going to be or anything. So it's definitely crazy to do it in 45 minutes, but it's doable, and I think you guys can do it, and I'm super proud of you for even trying and attempting it. So I can hear my son laughing in the other room, so I'm going to go have fun with my family, and I hope you kind of enjoy watching me do this, but it also might be super weird to watch. Okay. Good luck, everybody.